Good evening, everybody. Hear me okay in the back? All right. Well, welcome to our presentation this evening on tethering. Before we get started, I'm gonna open up with just a quick video, and we'll get started. Let's see.
So it all started when a friend of mine, Steve Rodriguez, posted a thing on Facebook who was contacted by a neighbor at first. Well, he said that somebody saw a dog laying lifeless on a neighbor's backyard. No food, no water, no shelter. This is 100 degrees outside, and she asked for help. I myself happened to be leaving the house. We were 8 minutes away, so we were the first to respond. My plan was just to go there and make sure the dog was okay. I did not think the dog would be dead, but when we got there, the neighbor was washing his truck. Now, I approached the guy. I always do my best to make a tense situation less tense. So I asked him, hey, how's it going? I saw this post on Facebook. I'm just coming to make sure the dog's okay. So he went back to the backyard to check. What made it frustrating was that he came out and jokingly said, yeah, the dog's dead, laughing about it. I didn't think it was funny myself, but 5 minutes later, Precinct 5 shows up with about 5 vehicles, and that's when he knew he was in the wrong. The story that he told us was that this is his son's dog. He hadn't checked on the dog in 2 days, so this dog was hungry, thirsty, again, no shelter, nothing, for 2 days. There were people all inside the house. There was about 8 people who came outside that day. One of these people could have easily just checked on the dog. And as we're coming up to the house now, you can see that this is a beautiful neighborhood. Brand new fencing, somewhere you'd never think that something like this would happen. Because you don't think that something like this would happen, people don't really take the time to look, to recognize all the signs that are there. This happens anywhere. It's not subjected to one neighborhood. It just really brings back all the frustration of that day. That, again, there were 8 people inside the house. Somebody could have easily saved his dog's life. He died of heat exhaustion. Very easily preventable with water, a little bit of shelter. Just something to help. And it all happened here. Where just someone posted a picture of the dog laying down and a plea on Facebook. So when I walked up, I saw a lifeless dog on the floor. Again, 2-foot tether, no food, no water, no shelter. And right behind him was a small enclosure, a 2-by-2-foot enclosure with another chihuahua inside. No food, no water, again, 100 degrees outside. And luckily, we were able to save him, but he was on the verge of heat exhaustion as well. And clearly, the person could afford a new fence, which indicates that they have the money to provide for their pets. They just didn't. So I'm glad at least this person did put that thing on Facebook and gave us the opportunity to save one and use Rocco's story as a projection for all other dogs in this situation. Again, this is not subjected to one neighborhood, and this happens all the time.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Ramsey. I'm the Director of Animal Services for the City of Lufkin. I'm joined with Ms. Kristy Bice, the Executive Director of the Winnie Humane Society. And we're here to talk this evening about tethering. We like to welcome all our citizens that are out tonight, also any elected officials that are in the audience tonight, and any other government officials from any other entities that are here as well. We appreciate you coming out. Our goal here tonight is really twofold. Number one, we want to explain and have a discussion about the new ordinance that was recently passed within our city limits. Not to be confused with the state law that went into effect January 18th. Some of you may be aware of that. So these are two different laws. One's state law, and we're really focusing on the city ordinance tonight, which is different than the state law. And I'll talk about the differences later in the presentation. The second goal this evening is really just for us to tell the story of why this was important legislation to pass. We are not the first city to pass a prohibited tethering ordinance. There are many other cities in the state of Texas that have already done this and have been doing this for several years. The research that we have done, we came up with over 100 cities that have similar ordinance to what we passed. The Dallas area, they passed this about 3 years ago, and once they passed it, all the surrounding metroplex areas, most of those cities passed it as well. I know Corpus Christi is another big city that passed it, and I think we'll continue to see as more municipalities realize the harms of tethering. I think we'll continue to see Texas cities go this route. Before we get started, I just want to briefly introduce myself. Again, my name is Aaron Ramsey, Director of Animal Services for the City of Lufkin. I've been in this position for going on 9 years now, all with the City of Lufkin. I was born and raised in Nacogdoches, so I'm a native East Texan. Prior to this, my background's been in the military. I'm a graduate of Stephen F. Austin State University with a degree in law enforcement and leadership. Moved back to the area in 2013 with my family. I kind of went full circle, missed East Texas, and so I came back here. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy serving the citizens in the community, and I also enjoy trying to make it a little bit better place for our domestic companion animals within our community. I can tell you East Texas is challenging. We have some unique challenges that are different than some of the other areas in the state, but there's challenges all over when it comes to some of the issues with domestic animals and how they are treated and so forth. Many of you in the audience, there's quite a few of you here tonight that are very aware and informed on all the challenges. My goal is really to reach out to those folks that maybe don't understand some of the issues that we face, and those are the folks we really want to talk to. But I firmly support this new ordinance. If you talk to anybody that's been in my line of work for any amount of time, they're gonna have the same feelings, just because the constant things that we are exposed to when it comes to tethered animals. I can tell you that we deal with these types of situations on a continuous and regular basis, and what we found is that in most of these complaints, they come through our office in the form of neglect or welfare check. Someone calls and they want us to go out and check on a particular animal that's tethered or whatever the situation may be. And we define neglect simply as providing lack of proper food, water, shelter, veterinary care, and also I'll include social interaction. Animals are, as many of you know, extremely social creatures, and they need human contact. They need exposure to other animals and other people. And what we find a lot in these with tethering is a lot of these animals that we come in contact with, they just don't, they're deprived of that, and they don't get that. We have also found part of the problem with the previous state laws on tethering and part of our own ordinance is a lot of these habitual violators. We are constantly called, and we'll go out and we try to educate, and we work with the dog owner to try to correct some of these violations and problems we're finding, and they'll correct them. They'll fix them while we're there on the spot. But as soon as we leave, 2 days later, 3 days later, a week later, we're back. The animal's back in the same condition that it's in, or they're committing the same violations. So, from my perspective, it's a constant battle. It's just an endless cycle, and it's really a waste of resources, honestly. With our new city ordinance, it's extremely clear cut. It sets the expectation for pet owners up front, and it's not vague. I mean, it's easily understandable. So those are some of the reasons why I really support the new ordinance. Before I introduce Kristy, the way this is gonna proceed, she's gonna do the first half of the presentation, and she's just gonna talk about a lot of the harms of tethering from both a public safety standpoint and also a neglect standpoint. She's going to present some really good research that's been done on what the effect is on these animals that we deal with, and also people as well. Before I do that, I just want to say one last thing. The photos that we've used in this presentation, they're all photos from animals that we have dealt with or had cases with or worked in some capacity within our own community here. We didn't go out and just pull photos off the internet of random animals. These are all animals that we have dealt with right here in our own community. I will warn you up front, some of these photos are a little graphic. I did not include them in this presentation for any type of shock value. We talked about it and we had a lot of conversation about it. We included them because it helps tell the story of why this was extremely important for us to do. A lot of times people are just unaware, and we find that, a lot of times these dogs, they don't have a voice. They can't make a complaint, right? So we depend on people to bring our attention to situations that are bad. But the reality is that a lot of times it's just people don't know. They're completely unaware. They don't know what's going on in the community a lot of times. And I can tell you, when I started this job 9 years ago, I thought I was a pretty informed American. I mean, I was educated. I thought I had pretty informed about certain things, but it's been eye-opening for me the 9 years I've been here, and some of the things that we've seen when it comes to tethered animals. So again, I appreciate you coming out. We will, at the end, we'll have a question and answer period, so you're more than welcome to ask if you're unsure of anything or any question you want to ask. We'll cover that at the end. So with that being said, I will go ahead and turn it over to Kristy. Thank you.
To the mom in the back, I just want to make sure you're okay with the children in the pictures and things like that. Okay. I don't want any nightmares tonight. They're not that bad, Wendy. But, all right. Just want to make sure everybody heard that part. So, as Aaron said, my name's Kristy. I'm the Executive Director for the Winnie Humane Society of Angelina County. I've been at the Humane Society for about 3 years. I've been in the nonprofit sector in Lufkin for a little over 13 years, and the nonprofit industry in general for a little over 20 years. So we got on board to collaborate with the city of Lufkin on this educational outreach effort because it is important that our pet owners understand tethering, what it looks like in our community, how it affects dogs and people in our community. So here we go. So dog tethering and animal well-being. This right here is just a picture number one of a cable that cut this dog's neck. And again, like Aaron said, these are all local examples and such, but that's one of the consequences that we have to deal with in tethering. We're going to go over a little bit of definitions of tethering. There's a typical tether that we're thinking of that's like this one right here, and then you've got temporary restraints. Again, this is an actual picture from animal control. Later on in the slide, we'll get a little bit more of a look at this dog right here. So going over the definition of tethering, tethering is the act of using a rope, strap, or cord for keeping an animal, typically a dog, within a certain radius on a property and in a continuous manner fixed to an object. Who would like to give me examples of objects that you've seen dogs tethered to?
A tree.
A tree? A truck, right?
Concrete block.
A concrete block? A trampoline? Dog houses? You know, all sorts of pipes, things like that. So it's a fixed object that the animal, typically the dog, is attached to with a chain, rope, or cord. The temporary restraint, this is more of like our leash laws, walking dogs in the park, out and about. Most communities like Lufkin and other communities in our county have leash laws. By definition, having a dog on a leash means a person controls that animal by use of a strap or a cord attached to the collar or harness of the dog. Some communities allow dog owners to temporarily attach a dog's leash to a stationary object, such as a signpost, while the owner completes a task. Or you could be in the park and you put the leash underneath your chair and the dog's sitting right next to you. That's a temporary restraint. Aaron uses an example of you're getting things out of your car and you've got the dog's with you, has been with you, you've got to carry things in, plus the kids, temporarily fixing the dog to the tree while you do that or something, While there are other public safety issues to consider with this type of restraint right here, in most cases it doesn't constitute inhumane tethering, because the dog is not being left there for hours, for days, for weeks, for months, whatever it may be. Also, there's no neglect in that situation. The dog is simply just temporarily restrained. These are not the type of situations we're talking about tonight. We're talking about inhumane tethering. So there's a difference between tethering and temporary restraint. Our recent city ordinance allows for the exemption with the temporary restraint. Aaron will talk about that more later. Are there any questions needing clarification on tethering and what the definitions are? Okay. Here's that dog from earlier that was attached to the truck, so you get a more close-up look. So inhumane tethering, let's talk about that. Dogs are inherently social creatures. We have, as a society, we understand common good of animals. We have a value that those animals are to be treated humanely with food, water, and shelter. So inhumane treatment is the lack of those items. So dogs, they learn how to be good canine citizens through interactions with humans and other pets. When a dog is tethered outside, one of the most common things that occurs is neglect. As we saw from that video earlier, 8 people were in that home and had not checked on the dog in 2 days. We're going to see some other cases throughout the presentation where Aaron demonstrates people were home and just didn't bother with the dog, or it wasn't their responsibility. That was another one. A dog being chained alone in one spot continuously cannot develop appropriate social skills and is vulnerable to becoming a public safety risk. So that is about the mental well-being of the dog. We'll get more into it a little bit later, but dogs that are chained up or tethered to a fixed object are 2.8 times more likely to have a bite case, a bite record. That's because they're aggressive. They're protecting that territory that is theirs on the tether. So, continuously restrained, unsocialized dogs are more likely to perceive humans and other animals as threats. And again, that just has to go with the territory they're protecting. We're going to see some cases in a little bit of, it actually was a death where the little boy was visiting his grandfather, and he was on the swing in the grandfather's yard, and the dog broke off the tether and got the little boy. But we'll see that in a minute. So, continuing on with this, when a friendly dog is continuously changed, it does become neurotic, unhappy, and often aggressive. It's neglect, right? If you were neglected, how would you feel all the time? So that is what they're dealing with day in and day out. Additionally, this is awful. The necks of the chained dogs become raw as a result of improperly fitted collars and constant straining to escape confinement. So if they're out there being neglected, not even necessarily with a collar, he's probably got pictures, and picture number 1 was a good example of just the rope, right? The trawler, the cord. So if it not even collars sometimes, but even those type of devices used to restrain dogs can cause those issues with their necks. My point in that is basically, if the dog's being neglected outside already by being on a tether, do you really think that the owner is going to change out the collar or be watching for things like that? It's just going to happen. It's a series of things that are all going to fall like dominoes. Chained dogs frequently become entangled in their chains, limiting their access to food, water, and shelter. We've all seen that happen, right? We've all seen dogs dump over their water and their food, and it may be aggravating. And if you are a person that's aggravated by that easily, what are the chances you're going to go back out there and fix it? You're not, So, when that occurs, they're going to be left without. So again, they won't have any water, they won't have any food, and it's just further neglect by the pet owner. All right, so tethering is dangerous to people. Chained dogs have killed at least 109 people from 1965 to 2001. One of the things Aaron and I both forgot to mention at the beginning of this presentation is we worked in partnership with the Texas Humane Legislation Network down here. And some of this data that they're giving us, we want to credit them with that data because they're allowing us to use that for this presentation. So we want to thank the Humane Legislation Network for assisting us with that. But they found from 65 to 2001, of those 109, 99 people were children that had been killed and just had wandered into the reach of the chained dog. So a child who is unsupervised, and that's what happens. 11 were attacks by dogs who broke free of their restraint. That's an issue we have here in Lufkin as well with roaming dogs, right? You can be out walking. How do you know if that's a safe dog or an unsafe dog? So, chained dogs are statistically more dangerous than free-running packs of dogs. That's, again, where I was saying 2.8 times more likely to have a bite case on a chained dog than you are with a domesticated pet. Here's the examples of Texas children killed by tethered dogs. This one is from 2018, so it's fairly recent. According to the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, the boy was playing in the backyard of his home. The Sheriff's Department said the dog was tied up when he attacked the child. It appears that the child may have gotten too close to the dog. One of the relatives of the child looked out into the backyard and saw that the dog had his mouth around the little boy's neck and was shaking him. Kids don't know. They want to go up and pet the dog. So he got a little too close. This one right here is a local story, just down the road in Henderson. This young boy, Caden, he was the one that was visiting his grandfather, and the grandfather had the dog tethered to a tree in the yard. Family members said the child had been playing on a swing set when the pit bull freed itself from the chain and attacked the boy. Not only are they dangers, having a dog tethered is a danger to itself, but it's also a danger to people. Again, Aaron is put together local pictures. So this is one of his animal control officers who every day have to go into situations like this. So when the dog cannot flee, it's gonna fight, and that's what typically occurs. So his staff is also at risk of being injured. Unsocialized dogs that break free and roam are far more dangerous than socialized pets. We've already covered that a couple of times. Chained dogs are rarely vaccinated, presenting a disease threat. One of the things that made me think about is I was wondering if Aaron had ever gotten a vet report back on a dog and it had said the dog was not infested with internal parasites. And he's like, no, never, because that is exactly what's gonna happen. And not only internal parasites, but the external parasites as well. So those are all preventable diseases. They're spreadable diseases. And it affects our shelters, it affects our community, the dogs. It's a problem. So tethered animals are not going to receive the medical care that they need. Even less, they're not even going to receive a heartworm pill. And everyone knows in our area, your animals are more than likely to be heartworm positive if they stay outside, just with the humidity and the mosquitoes and all that. Chained dogs are rarely altered and contribute to the homeless pet problem. So if she's a female right here, any male can come up to her, she has nowhere to go, gonna mate her, and she's gonna have litters. And what's gonna happen to the litter? Also, that's gonna keep happening until she dies. Chained dogs, once impounded, require more resources to care for and rehome. Ain't that the truth? They do, because they're coming in with psychological issues. We can't put them in general population with the rest of the dogs. They would tear them apart. And then try to find an adopter for them. That's hard. That's going to be patient enough to work with that animal, you know? So, in saying all of this, organizations against inhumane tethering, these are national organizations with our state veterinary medical association, but the USDA, the AVMA, the Texas VMA, and the CDC. The U.S. Department of Agriculture says, and they've said this since 1996, so this is how long of a conversation it's been. Our experience in enforcing the Animal Welfare Act has led us to conclude that continuous confinement of dogs by a tether is inhumane. A tether significantly restricts a dog's movement. A tether can also become tangled around or hooked on the dog's shelter, structured, or other objects, further restricting the dog's movement and potentially causing injury. Even though that dog in the video was on a 2-foot tether, it could have easily gotten caught on something as well. Y'all saw the structure that it was attached to? It could have easily gotten caught on any of those pallets. Per the AVMA, never tether or chain your dog because this can contribute to aggressive behavior. The CDC says most dogs are most likely to attack are male, unaltered, and chained. So chained dogs are 2.8 times more likely to bite, and victims are most often children, small, weak targets, injured, disabled people, elderly, those that don't move fast on a walk. So that sums up the part with defining tethering, showing you what it is, how it affects the dog, people. Are there any questions on that piece?
Kristy,
Yes?
just talking about tethering in general, but doesn't the Texas Humane legislation that the state bill that just passed allows tethering with specific measurements, et cetera? Is that right?
So the state law, yes. The city ordinance does not, is a complete ban. So Aaron will get more into that in
I can
just a
speak to that here in just a second, but yes, the state law does, it does still allow you to tether. It just can't be a chain. It has to be some other type of material, a cable, and also it can't be weighted. And then there's minimum lengths. I don't have the law in front of me, but I think it's either 10 feet or it's 5 times the length of the dog from the tip of the nose to the base of the tail.
But here in Lufkin, it's going to be no tethering at all.
Yeah, it's completely prohibited tether.
And the reason why that is, the state law has a little bit of a vagueness with it. So, without going into too much, but
Well, I actually read it, so I was really sure that it was not exactly the same as the Lufkin, because Eric worked so hard on it.
Yeah, and so you want me to come on?
it's to, it's to help give it some meat and help our local law enforcement be able to enforce the anti-tethering and such. But yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
How are runners affected by this new rule, this new law?
How's what?
Runners?
Runners? Specifically, like.
So the ordinance doesn't address runners, so that's going to be considered a tethering. So, yeah, and I'll talk more. I know what you're referring to. You're referring to like a trolley or pulley system. And
Oh, that? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, the trolley systems, yes, ma'am. He'll talk about it, but that's considered part of it. We'll cover at the end how to get around things like that, or how to help with things like that. And that's part of why we're involved. I was for the educational outreach piece, but with us being a nonprofit, we have a little bit of more of movement we can do than the city. And so we will help the community with resources for compliance with the new ordinance. So it's not just, we'll talk about it more in a minute, but it's not just about fencing. It can be dog behavioral classes. It can be dog house, an appropriate size dog house, something like that people might need. So there's a lot of resources we'll cover in a little bit. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron and let him go through the cases with you.
Alrighty. Well, thanks, Kristy. She did an excellent job of really talking about the stuff that we see here regularly within our own community. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go through some cases, present some case summaries on some tethering cases that we've been involved in. I selected these certain cases because they really show both what she talked about as far as a danger to people and the public, and also the neglect to animals as well. So we kind of balanced it out in that format. I can tell you I had an extremely large library to choose from of what you're going to see this evening. And again, I selected these for certain reasons, and I'm going to highlight those when I discuss them. I'm also going to tell you there's some graphic photos. Again, I'm going to tell you these photos you're going to see are going to be a little more graphic than what you've seen on with some of the previous photos. There's some photos of injuries to people, so I just want to warn you up front. So we'll go ahead and get started. Once I get through the cases, I'm gonna bring up the ordinance that was passed. We'll go basically through the ordinance and I'll explain it, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions. And again, there's Sounds like there's a little confusion on the state law versus the city ordinance, but when I show the city ordinance and talk that piece, I think it'll be clear because it's completely different. Alrighty. All right, so the first case I want to highlight, everybody see this okay? I'm not going to read off the slide. You can read it and I'll talk you through it. So if you look at the date, this is just something we handled a month ago. And with this first case, this is a typical abandonment case that we see a lot here in Lufkin, where a dog owner leaves the property and leaves the animal behind. And in this particular case, you can read it, I'll talk you through it. The dog owner owned a piece of property. He was remodeling the property, and he left and left the dog tied there. We finally, took us a while to track him down. The complaint came through us that there was two deceased dogs on this piece of property. Sure enough, we go out, investigate, find the two deceased animals. So we eventually were able to track down that property owner and brought him in for questioning. And you can read his responses up there. Basically, he didn't have enough time, had some life events happen, didn't have enough time to go over and check on his animals that were tethered. I think it says 2 to 3 months is what he told us. And, completely unacceptable. This is also a really good example of what she was talking about with the animal overpopulation. We see this all the time with a lot of these animals. They're unaltered. The females are unaltered. They become impregnated on the chain, and then they end up at our shelter. That's why we take in 5,000 animals a year at our shelter, because stuff like this right here. So the neighbor reported that it did have a litter of puppies while on the property. It was 3. One was found deceased. A neighbor actually rescued one, and then we don't know what happened to the other puppy. And you can read the veterinary report, what the animals died of, what they determined the cause of death. They both actually tested for parvo. Again, going back to that, when the dogs are kept outdoors in that condition all the time, they're exposed to all kinds of disease, parasites, heartworms, and if they're not on any type of preventative or they're not provided proper vet care, then bad things happen. Very malnourished. The larger female also, the vet's office suspected that it had been hit by a car at some point because it had old injuries, and also puppy was infested with intestinal parasites. And then the big one here is they suspected the cold weather played a demise in the animals. Yes, go ahead.
What happened to that puppy?
Which one?
The one that they found.
It was, the one they found was rescued and actually turned into our office. So the one that was found, alive by the neighbor.
Right, but after that.
I'm not sure. I don't have that information with me right now, but. I know you guys are going to want to ask a lot of questions about these, and you know what? I'm okay. If you have a question, I'll just answer it now because I know. But some of this I can't really go into, especially the more recent ones. I can't really go into a lot of detail about because some of this are still being adjudicated and processed. So, all right. So here's the photos from the case file. Some of these photos, it's kind of hard to see. This is the female that was found deceased. It's hard to see. Everybody see my little laser pointer there. It had a swivel. This was the tether that it was attached to. And it was found off the tether, so it either somehow escaped at some point or somebody let it off, a neighbor. But this runs on, and it was actually tethered to this is a block of concrete, and don't have a real good photo, but that's basically what the animal was tethered to. And then the deceased puppy was found up against the house. It's hard to see, but it's right there. Again,
Can I interrupt for a second?
yeah.
One thing I forgot to mention was, and you can see it on here, but tethered animals are also likely to get attacked while they're tethered up. So this one, they could never confirm it, but you could clearly see, like, these were deep bite marks. We actually went on this one too. And, the dog was attacked while it was on the tether. So they have no way of defending themselves also while they're chained up.
So, all right. So, again, I just highlight a couple things. The problem with animals not being altered and, contributing to the animal overpopulation, and obviously just the terrible neglect that occurred. And, unfortunately, the flippant attitude of, I just couldn't get back over there 2 or 3 months. He knew, this individual said the reason that he had the dog in the first place is because he had a stray cat problem, and he tied the dog up to ward off the cats. And so in a lot of these, a lot of what we see with tethering, the animal's it's not a pet. It serves a purpose. There's some utility for it. And I understand that people have working animals, and I get that, right? I understand working dogs and hunting dogs and all that, but the biggest thing we hear a lot of times, what are you doing out here? Why is this out here tied up continuously all the time? Well, it's what do you think the number one thing is we hear? Anybody? Guard dog. It's a guard dog, and I make the argument. Well, okay. Well, the dog's tied in the furthest part of your yard, and what do you like when somebody comes in your house? I mean, what purpose is what is it guarding at that point or protecting? But all right, I'm gonna move on. We got quite a few more, and we're kind of getting. I don't want to keep everybody here too long. All right, so this next case, this is another abandonment case. This was recent as well. If you look at the date, we see this a lot with rental properties. When renters leave, whether they're evicted or they leave on their own, a lot of times they'll leave the animals back, and a lot of times they'll leave them tethered, or a lot of times they just leave them in the house. In this particular case, we got a call again, another deceased animal on a chain. So a lot of times in cases like this, by the time we're brought in, especially with rental properties, it's way after the fact because number one, sometimes when these people leave, it might be a week or 2-3 days a week before the property owner goes over there to check on the property or do whatever, and that's a lot of times when this stuff is discovered. And so I'm going to highlight a few things in this photo, which is you're going to see a pattern here with a lot of this stuff, and just to drive home some of the things that Kristy was talking about, and some of the main points that she made. Overturned water bucket, and she had mentioned about water sources. That we get that, especially in the summer. It's a constant call. Either no water, or this is what we find a lot of times that it's dumped over. They tried to give it water. 5 minutes after they put the water out, the bucket's dumped over, and who knows? Sometimes it's days before. It's an afterthought to go back and fill it up. So this is extremely common. We always find these situations, dumped over bowls. They were feeding it something at some point. The other thing I'll note here is, the animals, it appears to be an area that's completely devoid of any human activity or, a lot of times these animals are on a piece of the property out in the corner, and a lot of times there's other refuse in the yard and trash, and they blend in, they become part of the scenery, and a lot of times they're an afterthought to provide care for them. Another couple of things we see typically, look how short the chain is, extremely short, no shelter. It's got this tiny little area to go to the bathroom in, eat in, and sleep in. So that's where your parasites and all that comes into play, because the dog's living in its own feces constantly in the dirt. Go back. Okay. You can tell, completely malnourished, ribs are showing, hip bones showing, no abdominal fat, stomach sunken in. The last thing I will point out on this slide is this is the owner's idea of proper, protection from inclement weather. You got a blanket thrown in the dirt. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. Kind of showed a couple examples, very recent examples of on the neglect side. Going to switch gears and talk about the danger to people and the public safety issue that she had mentioned with these next couple of cases. This drives home the point of what she was talking about with dogs becoming aggressive and neurotic that are continuously chained. They have similar physiology as we do, right? We all have, the fight-flight syndrome like she talked about. The problem with tethered animals is they don't have anywhere to escape. So, a lot of times there is no flight. So what do? They stand their ground, and they're constantly going through that cycle when they're left out for long periods of time. Everything's, depending on the breed of the dog and the other factors, everything that passes by on the street, everything that it's happening in its environment, they're constantly evaluating it, whether or not that's a threat or not. And over time, they become extremely aggressive. So I'll talk you through this one really quick. We had a gentleman walking down the street. 3 dogs were loose on the dog owner's property in the yard. They come running off the property, and they severely maul this individual that was merely walking down the road. They drug him to the ground. They caused serious injuries to his back, head, ears. He had bite wounds all over his arm from defensive bite wounds, trying to keep the dogs off of him. Witness stated that he could not get up. That he was fighting these dogs off. He's extremely fortunate because the dog owners were actually home at the time when this occurred. 2 males and a female come running out of the house, and they actually have to pull the dogs off this guy. This could have been it was bad. Could have been way worse than what it was because he couldn't defend himself, and the dogs were not stopped. And you will notice the neighbors and witnesses, the dogs are normally chained in the backyard. All right, so I'm going to tell you these. I'm going to go ahead and show these photos. They're going to be a little graphic. It's going to be photos of the victim and the injuries. That's his back, deep puncture wounds to the back. You can't see, defensive wounds from bites to the arm, and he's missing his earlobe. It's very fortunate that he's okay today. All right, this is another example of animals that are continuously tethered and becoming aggressive. And I'm just highlighting some obviously pretty serious incidents, but that we're called out almost daily for animals that have gotten loose or gotten off the chain and are tethered, and we'll find them a lot of times. We'll find them when we get to the field. A lot of them they're running down the street with a rope attached and a tether attached. And so this one, we were called out to the hospital to investigate a bite. The officer arrived, and there was a lady who had been extremely hurt, very serious injuries. She went over to this is actually a friend's house, or a family friend's house, and she got out of her car, was walking up in the yard. Dog was tethered in the front yard. She simply bent down to pet and say hello to the dog. The dog lunged and removed probably 80% of her lower lip and severed her, I think it was a right pinky finger. It was barely attached by some tendons. It happened like that. And a lot of times you hear stories about family members getting, bitten or hurt by tethered animals. And a lot of it, like they have that pent-up energy. They're always on the tether. They're overexcited. They're overstimulated. Animals bite for all kinds of different reasons. And so I think that's a lot of the cases where you see where family members, like the dog hurt somebody that they've known for a long time. A lot of that is due to just, again, what we talked about with the aggression and constantly being overstimulated and confined to that chain. Okay, these are graphic. All right, I've got two more to go over, and then we'll go ahead and get into the ordinance. This one was a worker that was repairing a roof of a local business. Up on top of the roof doing some work, looked over and noticed a large dead emaciated Great Dane in the backyard of a house that was near the business. So we were called. We went over to take a look at the situation, what was going on. And this is really a tragic example of, I talked about they just become part of the scenery, right? I use that phrase. This is another case of that, where people take in these animals and for whatever reason, and then it's an afterthought to provide care. This is what we always see, right? It's never, when we approach these folks, it's never their dog. It's either their brother's dog, their sister's dog, their cousin's dog, their uncle's dog. It's never their dog. So this male in the house said that they had taken a female in that needed a place to stay, or she brought the dog in, and he's saying that, she brought it in, but she wasn't caring for it. She wasn't providing any care for the animal. Officer again found no water, found the deceased dog, obviously, found no water, found there was food, but it was thrown on the ground. Again, afterthought, I better throw some food out there for the dog. So the statement, and I'm not laughing, it blows my mind what some of these people say. So he knew, he said he knew the dog was dead, but he had to go to work. So these two individuals were arrested. This is the veterinary report. Again, showed that it would starve to death. No abdominal fat in the, around the digestive tract. Again, severe heartworm. Here's your same patterns we see all the time. It's hard to see where my pointer is. That's the chain that it was on, extremely short, tied around old tires. Here's your water source. Here's your, maybe a water source at some point. A Great Dane's a big dog. It's confined to a very small area. The dog, you can tell, it's completely emaciated. All right. I'm not trying to do overkill here, and I felt like that folks really need to know, and this is like pretty common stuff. This is not like stuff that we deal with occasionally. And the last thing I want to say about this last case, those were really bad cases. This is an example of what we see a lot, and I'll explain. Same thing. Dog chain, no food or water, welfare check. So we go out again, we find a tan German Shepherd that is extremely thin, on the glide path to what you saw with those other animals. We're on that glide path. We're heading down that road. And I'll show you here. Same thing. I think that was supposed to be the water source. Bone dry, debris, leaves, and dirt in the water source, overturned bucket. And that's food tray, I'm assuming. But you can see the side view, ribs are showing, hip bones starting to show. So this is, this animal is on the glide path to end up like so many we see, where by the time we're involved, they're already, they're dead. And it's the same thing. You saw her statement. It's a boyfriend's dog. Of course, we impounded the animal. They were issued a court summons, and they were left. Animals left it with us at that point, and of course nobody. Again, a lot of nobody comes and reclaims these animals. All right, so I've probably enough of that for tonight. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions about any of that before I get into the ordinance?
Is there any hope for dogs to become aggressive due to chaining to one day be family pets again?
Great question. So I can tell you that we do not have, yes, but that animal in a lot of cases is going to require a ton of work and a ton of attention by a trained dog behaviorist person that knows how to work with dogs and bring them back from situation being abused like that. And I can tell you, we don't have the resources to hire anybody where I work to do that. So, all right, good question. Any other questions? Okay. Well, all right. Here's the new ordinance. I'm gonna go through it. We'll talk about it. If you have questions, please ask. So right off the bat, right here, this tells you everything. An owner of a dog commits an offense if the owner restrains a dog by a tethering device. So everything that Kristy talked about, what is what we consider a tethering device, can't do it. Bottom line, no certain length of chain, no type of chain or type of tethering material, no cable. Just bottom line, you can't tether. Section B talks about the key to Section B right here is a defense to the prosecution. So basically what that means is as long as you can tether an animal, as long as this word right here, immediate possession, are two words, owner's immediate possession, and keyword, and accompanied by the dog's owner. So some examples of that would be you're in your yard, you're doing yard work, you're gardening, you're washing your car, you're having a social event outside, the dog is out there with you, and you temporarily have it tethered. Pretty straightforward. So what the next section C talks about the correct way to tether it in that situation when it's in your immediate possession and when you're accompanying the animal. So, and it just talks about just common sense, talks about has to be properly fitted collar, or harness designed for that use. So basically it's saying that you can't tie the tether around its neck or use a cable, or you got to do it properly, just like when you're walking your dog, right, on a leash, like most people do. All right. So the last piece of this is obviously we're not prohibiting anybody from walking their dog on a leash. Common sense. And this is the violation or the fine. It's a Class C misdemeanor up to a $500 fine, and any other court costs that are associated with it. All right. Before any questions, or is anybody not clear on what that's saying? Yes.
What would you say a properly fitted collar or harness looks like?
I would say a properly fitted collar or harness is one that is designed for the animal, that you would purchase at Walmart, a pet store, a normal collar, and or harness, like what you normally pick up at PetSmart, that is loose enough. I think, what is the rule? You want to get at least 2 fingers in there, right? And yeah. So, good question. Yes, ma'am.
The law states that it's going to be fined towards the owner, but in lots of your cases, it wasn't the owner of the animal, but the owner of the property. So how does your team tackle those? How do you decide who's going to be punishable?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's pretty easy, actually, and I mean, we deal with that all the time because, with those other cases and cases we deal with a lot, nobody wants to claim ownership of that, right? Because they don't want to get in trouble. So it basically comes down to the person on that property and who we can show has lived there for any amount of time, or his name is on, who is a renter there. And so it's basically who's on that property. It's pretty, it's not real difficult for us to do. But did I answer your question? Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
At what point will the dog be taken, or do they have? If you go out, give them a ticket, fine them. How long? If you go out next week and it's still the same, how long is it going to be till something is actually done to help the animal?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's several factors that will go into that. We always want to use a continuum of, call it a continuum of force, right? Especially if it's not an animal in a exigent circumstance, meaning it's not, the animal is not, in an emergency situation where if it doesn't doesn't have treatment now, it's going to die. We give warnings. Let me back up a little bit. So we've been already, once this was passed almost going on almost a month ago, we've already been out talking to the public. When these calls are coming in, we've already talked to a ton of people already about the new ordinance, and the city decided to offer a window because it is new and it's a pretty substantial change, right? It's going to cost dog owners. They're going to have to come up with a resource, right? If they want to care for their animal properly now. So we've been educating folks. March 1st, the folks that we have been notified of and complaints have been made to our office, they already know they have to come in compliance by March 1st, or they're going to be cited. After March 1st, when these complaints come in, if it's somebody that we have not had an opportunity to speak with yet, normally we'll try to give them a warning first and tell them, hey, look, this is now illegal. We're going to give you this amount of time to correct the problem, and then we follow up. If the problem's not corrected, then we would write a ticket at that point. If there's still no compliance, there would become a point where a judge is going to have to get involved, because we'll have to go to the judge and say, hey, we've done X, Y, and Z, and they're still not complying. We've written X number of tickets, and the dog is still out there. At that point, then we would seek to seize the dog, and a judge would have to sign off on a seizure warrant. And there might be a few cases of that, but I can tell you, most people, what they're going to do, especially when you get to the point of writing a ticket, and I'll tell you right now, we've already had this happen. What are they going to do? They surrender the animal, and and it's unfortunate all the way around. It's unfortunate for the animal, but it's, again, I mean, in the particular case I'm already thinking about, they didn't need to have the dogs. The dogs were, again, they were already on that glide path to complete neglect, extremely thin. They just couldn't provide for it. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but yeah. So after, if the tickets aren't doing anything, then at that point it would become a judge's decision on whether or not they're going to let us take the dog. So. Yes.
Sure. So the animal control officers are the ones writing the tickets.
And law enforcement and police, they can enforce the ordinance just like.
Like on a Sunday or something like that, you call the police.
Yeah.
And how is the police department handling all this? Because in the past, I mean, I've had problems with, calling the police. I had a neighbor who was just awful.
Yeah.
And they would come by and just shrug everything off. Finally, I got a police officer. I called him so many times.
Right.
He came to my door and he goes, "Hey, it's me. Let's go over to this lady's house." And he gave her a big ticket that night.
Right.
So this was several years ago. do they have enough officers? Do they have, do you have enough staff? Are they gonna give you more staff to do all this? Is it gonna be effective to get these two facilities done?
Those are all really good questions. So yes, the police department can write the citation just like we can. So in the part of the other reason this was put into ordinance is so a lot of people, animal control officers they're not peace officers. It's a certification, but they can enforce our city ordinances. So we can write tickets for this, animal control, and also the police can write tickets for a violation. And I've worked hand in hand with the police department already. They're extremely aware of they know the new ordinance. They're educating their officers on the new ordinance, and we're not a 24-hour service like they are. So they will handle the complaints really after 5 p.m. through the evening, and then when we come in, they'll a lot of times either they've addressed the issue, or if it needs follow up, they'll contact us and we'll go out and follow up on it. They're aware of the ordinance. They're gonna if they need to, they're gonna write citations just like we would.
You should expect problems that the judge has to handle. It's gonna be backlogged. They had human cases that are backlogged up the wazoo too.
No, that's a great point. And that's it is, and we're a small community. Like if you go to the larger cities, they have where there's more resources, and they actually have prosecutors that do nothing but handle this type of stuff. But we are a rural area. We're a small area. We don't have the resources like a lot of cities have. But with this, it's a municipal. This is a Class C misdemeanor, so it's not something that's going to go through like a county court. So it'll actually probably get processed a lot faster through our municipal court versus going to a county court in that way. So.
For those that don't know, how do you report a situation that you find like this?
Yeah. So you would call our two ways during like working hours. You would call our office and report it. We have a dispatcher. We dispatch animal control officers out for service. So you would report it to our office. If it's after 5 p.m., you would call the non-emergency police dispatch line.
What about like somebody who lives in Pollock? I guess more like Allen County. I guess it's only Angelina County that this ordinance.
Great question. It is not Angelina County. It's just within our incorporated city limits, and
so somebody out in Pollock like myself, it wouldn't do me any good to call them.
No, because they would have to. The city would have to adopt a similar ordinance, but outside of our city, there is the state law, which again is not obviously as strict as this, but it's better than what the previous state law was, and it offers some relief. So.
But the problem with that is there's hardly no sheriffs out in the county to do, constables to do anything around it.
Yeah, it's.
They're scattered. It's just they can hardly cover the county.
All right. Yes.
I have a question. Okay, like this woman up here was asking about a run, and sometimes those things are like 40 feet long with an 8-foot, 10-foot cable, whatever it is. And would you rather them be on something like that, or a 10 by 10 kennel that they have no room to run?
Yeah. So what we're telling people is, ideally, right, in a perfect world, everybody has a nice fenced yard, right? And so we do. I understand that completely. But the option is, and from what we see, a large enclosure. I would say 10 by 10, depending on, and 10 by 10 is definitely too small for some size animals. But we're in the day and age of, you can go to Tractor Supply, you can order online. They make these enclosures, I've seen them as large as like 20 by 15 or larger.
Well, we have a 6-foot fence around
Yeah.
our backyard, but she's an escape artist.
Yeah.
She finds hills or whatever to
Right.
be able to get over. So she has to be contained during work hours or
Right.
whatever, so.
Yeah, I completely understand that. Maybe look at your fence, and I know a lot of people who have a problem with animals digging out. They'll either put concrete around the base, or she's a jumper. Okay, yeah. I would say instead of tethering that animal, a larger enclosure, like pre-made enclosure, is gonna be better. And enclosure is gonna protect it
More
more.
room to run
Yeah.
on the run.
Right.
Than she would in that little bitty enclosure.
Yeah, you can get. I've seen dog runs that are 40 feet long.
But you said those are outlawed.
No.
The runners.
I'm talking about the trolley. Yeah, the trolley. So what you're talking about, a trolley system where you got point A to point B. You have a line that's attached, and then it's on like a wheel or a trolley system, and it can run back and forth. Right. Yeah. So the ordinance doesn't specifically address that. It doesn't. Doesn't meet necessarily the definition of tethering. But what I will say about that, and you're probably a perfect dog owner, but a lot of times with the trolleys, what I see is the dogs in the same terrible condition. And I'm not saying you. What we see a lot of times, those things, we've seen them get tangled all the time, just like a tether does. But I would recommend a large enclosure or some type of dog run. All right. I hope I answered your question. So.
Well, I think when he's saying dog run, I think he's meaning like a long kennel.
Yes.
Not a dog
run. Not a trolley system or pulley system. Yeah. I've talked to other cities before that because there's so many. I've seen a ton in the last 2 years. We've really looked at this, and there's so many different tethering laws and ordinances out there, and I've talked to a lot of different places. The issue with the pulley system is they'll switch to the pulley system, but the dog's still in a either the line's too short or it's getting tangled up or it still can't get to its shelter or still can't get to its water. So I've talked to municipalities that that it's almost you're going to run into the same issues with tethering as you are with those, and that's not. And I'm not making a blanket statement that everybody I get it. Dogs are escape artists, and the other thing I'll say is our ordinance is complaint driven. Okay, we're not coming out there and looking for if you need to tether your animal for a very brief period. Those aren't the complaints that come into our office, and we rarely, if any, get anything like that. If the dog is being taken care of, people don't call. It's the complaints we get are the obvious situations, and that's. So if you're taking care of your animal and you're doing the right thing, we're not coming out looking for this. We're complaint driven. Somebody calls us, we're going to go out and we're going to check it out. So, and the officers have a lot of discretion. They if it's somebody we've never dealt with and the animal's in good shape, and what are we going to do? We're gonna educate them. We're going to tell them what the ordinance is and what they need to do to comply. And, and we're not just out there to start taking everybody's animals away. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
You did.
Okay.
Is it classy misdemeanor on the first call?
We give a warning, like if it's the first time we come out, and again, it depends on if the dog's in bad condition. Yeah, they have the authority to go ahead and issue that citation. So it's based on.
But if she's running around nice and healthy and bad, she's good.
Yeah, they're gonna issue a warning and educate.
Like inhumane tethering, the
The
white dog,
but
like.
there are people that will look, let's go look and see if we can find anybody, because it's on Facebook. People are calling just because they're tied or tethered or on a run or whatever.
I get social media and I understand all that, but I can tell you, since the state law has been enacted and this thing's been, when this was voted in, like the calls we're getting is all legitimate stuff. But I understand. I mean, animals, people are extremely passionate. People like to get on social media and it just whole nother world. And but I can tell you from at this point, everything that we have gotten has been legitimate things that need to be looked at. So, all right. Any other questions? I know it's 6:20. All right. Any final questions or concerns? Yes.
The monies that are collected from these fines, are they earmarked to go back to your department so it can help with growth and future education for the community?
Yeah. No. So any whether it's a penal fine from a violation, whether it's something that any violation, whether it's the police department is a fines for whatever, writes a ticket for, or traffic violation, noise, whatever the violation is, it goes into a general fund, and it all supports. It supports the whole. There's not one particular department that it goes to. It helps support all city departments. So, and we didn't look. This wasn't our, like, from a revenue standpoint. That's not why we're passing. And I know there's probably somebody somewhere out there that's, well, they're just trying to increase their revenue down there. No, I can tell you what I do. And at the shelter, we're funded by the city. It is a black hole. It's your tax dollars with the number of animals that are coming in. The city, it's a black hole for money. And I've done the math before. For each animal that comes in, it costs us about $136. As soon as the animal enters the door, it's about $136. And we take in 5,000. Yes, sir.
Do you have any other input about the county and the laws that?
So we invited them here tonight. Part of the other part of this is the city of Lufkin leaders here are showing an example to the rest of Angelina County on how to develop something like this for your community. And so we did invite the other municipalities here to learn and be part of the discussion. And some of them did come tonight, so we thank you guys for coming, because each one of these municipalities also have contracts with Lufkin for Kurth to take their animals. So it can be in those cities' financial interest to have something like this. So it's at this point, we're starting today with just helping educate our community about the new city ordinance that's been passed by our leadership, and also invite the other municipalities, including the sheriff's department, here to help with all of Angelina County.
Off the top of your head, do you know some of the rules that are going on in the county?
As far as animal related, so there's no leash law in the county, right? If you're outside of city of Lufkin, all the other cities have leash laws. So if you're outside of the incorporated city limits and you live, in the county, there is no leash law. So they can't enforce that because there's no law. They follow the state law for the most part when it comes to especially livestock, and with domestic animals, to be just there's not a lot of state laws that deal directly with domestic animals. There's not. There's a couple, There's cruelty to non-livestock animals. That's a penal code violation, and those are a lot more serious. You're getting into like felony torture charges. You're getting into stuff like intentional. You've harmed animal, you've killed an animal out of malice, stuff like that. But there's not really there's only a handful of state laws, and that's what the sheriff, they go by. They go by the state law.
What is the state law for tethering?
So the state law, I should have put it in here. It is the highlight. I can tell you what the highlights of it are because it's pretty long. It basically addresses the fact that you can no longer, it's illegal to use a chain now. So you have to use a cable or some other method. But with the cable, I won't even go down that road. You have to use something other than chain. Chain can't be weighted. It talks about proper shelter in there. The animal has to be, the shelter has to be large enough for the animal to be able to stand erect, turn all the way around, lie completely down without being impeded. So that's going to help with a lot of like what we see a lot, and some of you probably see a lot, like the people who use the barrels, or they'll have some extremely small type of shelter. So that's addressed specifically, like the size of the shelter, giving the animal enough room to move around. It talks about also, again, they can't have weights on the tether. It talks about has to have, it has to be, the tether has to be attached to basically the same language that you saw on this one, the proper collar, proper form. It can't be a choke or pinch type collar. And that's kind of the highlight of it. And some of you, I don't know if I'm missing anything, Molly. I know you've worked really hard on.
That was really the highlight of the whole state agenda. That was the one that they focused on the most.
Yeah.
Was you can still tether your dog in the county, but you cannot use a chain. Whereas the difference in the city ordinance, the tethering, it's much more stricter. But in the county, outside the city limits, you can use tethering, but no chains, because so many times as Aaron and Kristy so eloquently shown, they've had puppies on logging chains, and they're horribly abused. So the state finally did make the decision to outlaw the chains, which going out.
Molly, what was the state bill's number?
SB 5.
You can look it up online, state bills.
Or look under Texas Humane Legislation Network. You can log on to that or all of that Facebook to make changes you need or your questions that you have.
In that state law that we're talking about, it's actually in the Health and Safety Code. That's where the Health and Safety Code has a whole set of laws dealing with everything from, what does it have? Restaurant and stuff in there. It's just a lot of laws that are not necessarily criminal, or they're not. There's not a stiff criminal punishment, but I mean, they're still violated. There's a lot of stuff in there that are Class C misdemeanors and above. There are some things in there that are they're stricter.
So to be clear, you can tether your dog in the county. You just can't use a chain.
Correct. And you have to have proper. Same thing.
You can use a runner.
Outside of Lufkin ceiling.
Yes, outside of.
I've already had that question a few times already. What can we do in the county? What can we do in the county?
Yeah. So
I was unable to answer the questions correctly.
Yeah, the county, you still can tether, just can't be a chain. You have to provide the proper shelter, water, and
And so many times the length of the animal.
Yes, 10 feet or 5 times the length of the animal, measured from the tip of the nose to the base of the tail.
And the sheltering is very important. They finally adequately describe what
Yeah, it has to have. I think it describes the shelter has to
3 sides.
3 sides and provide protection from the elements.
they can stand up and they can turn around.
I will say one good thing, we've got a lot of problems in the county with animals, because I live in the county, not the city.
And you know,
But I will say this, I'm thankful that at least the county and the city have an agreement, and that if you do have animals out in the county, you at least have a place to take them. And you don't have to just, what happens in other counties. Other counties in this region don't have that option.
Right.
So we were at least lucky in Angelina County that we can take an animal into the Kurth shelter if we need to.
May I
That's a
just
blessing.
say
Yes.
to me, if the county would do what y'all are doing right now, just to have a sit down, that judges come, and commissioners come, maybe they can't call the meeting, but just enough of them to address questions about this. And one of the biggest problems in the county is the dumping, things like that. But, yeah, I'm speaking from behalf of all of us, just thank y'all so much for presenting this and educating us on, what this is, what it means. We appreciate y'all.
It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process, and we completely understand. This is, this is not gonna change things overnight. There's still gonna be neglect. The animals are neglected in all kinds of different ways, and but I from my 9 years experience here and from what I've seen, I truly believe over time that this is gonna help. It's gonna help, and it's gonna help reduce, as Molly was saying, we take in 5,000 animals a year, and the tethering is contributing to it. I've been out in the field on calls with the officers, and we see animals locked up all the time. A female locked up with a male, and what do? They once the puppies are born, they either bring them to our shelter and leave them, or they drop them off. Drop them off in the county. So, all right. Is there any other? We're gonna wrap this up. Any other questions? I appreciate your questions and your participation. I hope you've gained a little more understanding of what the new ordinance is and why we went this route. I'm gonna put some. You want to talk about this a minute?
Yeah, just quickly going through community resources. So we've been in the process of identifying and collecting information for fencing assistance. We are not going to be running a fencing program through Winnie, but we can help point homeowners, pet owners, renters, whatever, in the right direction for getting these issues solved. So that's been what we have found is this is going to be a building process. There's no true resource available right now in Lufkin, but that's also because this is a brand new ordinance for Lufkin. It's a brand new event for Lufkin. So, for example, we have a couple of nonprofits in town, Neighborhood Strong. I've reached out to them. It doesn't necessarily fit with their mission because their mission is about home revitalization for stable housing. It's not about fencing. Habitat for Humanity, there might be some possibilities there, but they don't get that many fencing materials donated. The city of Austin, I'm looking at their program a little bit more. They have a program called Fences for Fido, but that's through also a national network. But it helps fund their program. Part of also with this fencing is if we do something with donations, that is, you've got to have a place to store all of that, right, until it's needed. So we've got to take that into consideration. There's a couple, as we get people who are kind of need fencing assistance and request fencing assistance, the United Methodist Church in town, I reached out to them. They swap youth with another church during the summer from another Methodist church in Texas. And so these youth go to those communities for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. The Methodist Church has said that these projects could be projects for the youth to do while they're here that week, so we could get people on the books for that if needed. Home Depot, Lowe's, they have programs for helping communities. It's a matter of just tapping into that. Another option I wanted to mention for people is behavioral classes from local trainers. So if you need help finding a local trainer, we can help you with stuff like that. Aaron might know some as well, but local trainers are they're looking for business, but they're also, their goals, at least the ones we've come across, their intentions are to help the pet owner as much as possible keep this dog from coming into our facility. So whatever they have to do to make that happen, they're on it. I just wanted to mention our local trainers because we're working with a few of them already on some of the dogs we have at our shelter, and they reduce rates and all this other stuff. Doghouse resources, as they were talking with the state law, but it's a requirement now for a dog to have shelter. So Boy Scouts, there's blueprints available, all sorts of stuff for people to either have a doghouse built for them or can build one for themselves with good material that doesn't cost that much. So if you want to help in setting this up for our community, I mean, it's an ongoing process. So you can just contact me, Kristy at Winnie Berry, and join the fun.
All right. Oops. All right. Any other final questions before we go ahead and we'll close it out this evening? All right. Well, again, thanks. I really appreciate you guys coming out. Help spread the information, right? The more people we can talk to, the more people we can educate, the better understanding and better things will happen within the community. So I really appreciate you coming out. We're going to do this again at the high school on Friday at 4:15. It's open to the public. So if you know anybody that would be interested in listening, please let them know. And that's it. Thank you guys again for your participation, and hopefully we made things clear for you tonight. So thank you.
Thank you for giving this presentation.
Thank you. Whoever's going back.